The summer heat hung heavy over the Badger Creek plains, thick enough to taste, the kind of heat that made cattle slow and men slower. Nolan Hargreave wiped the sweat from his brow as he finished, tightening the reins on his horse, unaware that the next hour would unravel every truth he believed was nailed down. His 8-year-old son, Eli, sat on the fence rail, kicking dust with his boots, eyes fixed on the road stretching toward town. Nolan should have asked why the boy looked so restless, but his mind was already tangled with the wedding he'd been invited to, attend an obligation he didn't want but couldn't avoid. Sheriff Wallace had shown up that morning, with an envelope addressed to Nolan in a familiar hand he had prayed never to see again. Inside was a formal invitation, stamped with wax and sealed with the name he thought time had buried. Maribeth Quinn. He felt the name like a blade to the ribs. He wasn't sure what unsettled him. More, the fact that she was getting married today, or the fact she had sent him an invitation at all after vanishing 8 years ago, without goodbye, without explanation, without ever learning she carried his child inside her. He had raised Eli alone, doing his best to fill every gap he didn't understand, lying whenever the boy asked too many questions about his mother. He told himself he had no choice. "Pa?" Eli called, eyes squinting against the sunlight. "Why do we gotta go?" Nolan swallowed hard. "Because folks expect us there. But you don't wanna." He didn't answer. The truth hung between them like a storm cloud. Nolan had no desire to show. Up at the wedding of the woman he once would have torn the world apart for, but he owed it to himself and maybe to her to see what kind of life she'd carved after carving herself out of his. With a low grunt, he lifted Eli onto the saddle in front of him and nudged the horse forward down the long road to town. As they approached Willow Bend, the sounds of celebration filtered through the dusty streets. Fiddles, laughter, the clatter of boots against wooden walkways. Nolan tied the horse near the chapel and helped Eli down. Townsfolk greeted him with nods, unaware of the fire twisting beneath his skin. The chapel doors were already open, the air thick with the scent of wildflowers. Nolan stepped inside and the world seemed to slow. Maribeth stood at the far end of the aisle, dressed in white, veil trembling, hands twisting around her bouquet as though she feared it might shatter. Her groom, a man Nolan had never seen before, a polished stranger, with soft hands, waited stiffly at the altar. Maribeth's eyes scanned the crowd anxiously, like she was searching for someone. When her gaze collided with Nolan's, her breath hitched audibly. Her face paled. Nolan felt the ground shift beneath him. Before he could look away, little Eli tugged at his sleeve. His voice was too loud, too clear, echoing through the hushed chapel at the worst possible moment. "Papa, that's my mama." The room froze. Nolan felt every eye whip toward them. Maribeth's bouquet slipped from her fingers and hit the wooden floor with a soft, devastating thud. The groom's jaw clenched. The sheriff stiffened. A collective gasp rippled through the guests like a prairie wind. Nolan's blood roared in his ears. He grabbed Eli's shoulders, but the boy was pointing directly at Maribeth, eyes round with certainty. Nolan had never told him her name, never shown a picture. There was no way, there was simply no way for the boy to know. But he knew. And Maribeth, she looked as if she had been stabbed. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks unchecked. Whispers exploded from the pews. "Whose boy is that? Is she—" Dear God, the timing. Maribeth took a trembling step forward. "Nolan," she said, voice breaking. You brought him." Nolan opened his mouth, but nothing came. The groom, Samuel Riker, the wealthy land baron whose cattle empire sprawled across half the county, stepped forward, fury simmering beneath his calm facade. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. "Maribeth, do you know that man? Do you know that boy?" Maribeth's lips parted, but her breath hitched. No words coming. Nolan felt like he was being skinned alive under the weight of everyone's stare. He wrapped a protective arm around Eli. "Let's just go," he muttered. "We ain't staying." He turned. But the doors slammed shut, pushed closed by 2 of Riker's hired hands. The groom's voice cut through the panic. "No one leaves until I have answers." Maribeth collapsed to her knees and sobbed. Nolan's heart, hardened by years of abandonment, cracked down the middle. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected any of it. He reached for Maribeth before he could think, before pride could stop him, and she threw herself into his arms with a desperation that stole the breath from the room. Nolan, she whispered, shaking uncontrollably. Please, don't let them take him. Don't let them take my son. Nolan froze. Her son? Eli's fingers tightened around Nolan's shirt. Chaos erupted behind them, and everything Nolan thought he knew became ash. He looked down at Maribeth, at the terror twisting her face, at the truth trembling on her lips. Truth she had clearly carried alone for far too long. Start talking, he whispered. And she did, just not fast enough to prevent the storm, already barreling toward all of them. The next words out of Maribeth's mouth did not come easily. They cracked her open, spilling years of silent secrets and scars. They told me you were dead, she said, voice hoarse. The night I left Nolan, they told me you'd been shot, that you were gone. I ran because I thought they were after me next. I ran to save our baby. Her hand grazed Eli's cheek, trembling. Our son. Nolan stared at her, unable to speak. He remembered that night, the ambush outside the saloon, the blow to the back of his skull, waking days later with half his memories fogged and Maribeth gone. He had assumed she'd left by choice, assumed she'd abandoned him. The realization hit him like a freight train. Someone had lied to her. Someone had wanted them apart. The chapel's doors rattled again. Riker barked an order and his men braced the entrance, blocking escape. Nolan pulled Maribeth to her feet and placed Eli between them. Why would anyone tell you that, he asked. Maribeth wiped her cheeks, breath unsteady. Because I refused him. Her eyes flicked toward Riker. Because he wanted me even before my father died. He offered security, land, protection, but I told him I loved someone else, you. Her voice cracked. When I found out I was pregnant, I planned to come to you. But the night I went, Riker's men cornered me. They said you'd been shot dead in a dispute. I broke. I ran. I thought I was saving myself and the baby. Nolan felt sick. Riker stepped forward, expression twisting with cold calculation. Maribeth, enough. You're frightened and confused. The child's claim is nonsense. He's no son of yours. Eli stepped behind Nolan, clinging to his shirt. Don't you lie, the boy snapped, surprising even himself. I know her. I knew her soon as I saw her. Riker's jaw clenched so tightly the bone popped. The ceremony will proceed, he said darkly. This interruption ends now. Nolan squared his shoulders. Touch them and you'll answer to me. Riker's men shifted, hands drifting near their holsters. The guests murmured nervously, some inching back, others frozen in morbid fascination. The sheriff edged up beside Nolan, whispering urgently, Don't start a war in a chapel. Should have thought of that before you delivered that invitation, Nolan replied. Jaw locked. You knew she was alive. You knew she was here. Wallace swallowed. I didn't know it involved your boy. Nolan cursed under his breath. Maribeth suddenly gasped, hand covering her mouth. Nolan, the night before I left, there was someone else. Someone warned me to run, a woman. She gave me a slip of paper with a name. I never knew who she was. A name? Nolan asked. She nodded. She said if danger found me, I was to show people this name. That it would protect me. Whose name? Maribeth's eyes flicked toward the back pew, trembling. Your mother's. Nolan's chest tightened painfully. His mother had died years ago. But she had been sharp, cunning, and fiercely loyal. If she had learned of a threat, she would have acted. But how had she known? And who had tried to kill him? Riker snapped his fingers and his men tightened formation. Maribeth, he growled, you come back to the altar now or this gets ugly. That boy is not yours. The womb makes mistakes. Fear twists memory. Nolan stepped in front of her. You're not taking her. Or the boy. Riker's eyes darkened. You're forgetting something, rancher. I own this town. Not today, you don't. The guests edged aside as two armed riders burst through the back entrance, splintering the frame. Their faces were masked, their clothes dusty from hard travel. The taller one pointed at Nolan. You Hargreave? Nolan stiffened. Who's asking? The man tossed something metallic at his feet. A revolver, engraved with the Hargreave family crest. Nolan's blood turned to ice. That belonged to your mother, the stranger said. She died protecting a letter meant for you. Said you'd know what to do with it. Maribeth choked on a sob. Nolan knelt, opening the small metal cylinder attached to the gun's holster strap. Inside was a note in his mother's handwriting. Nolan, if this reaches you, they're coming for her. And for your child, trust no one, not the sheriff, not the banker, not the man who smiles too easily. Riker is not what he seems. Find the ledger. It will save her and destroy him. Mother. The room spun. Riker's face blanched. Get that letter. His men lunged. Gunfire exploded in the chapel, guests screaming. Pews splintering as bullets ripped through the air. Nolan shoved Eli beneath a pew and dragged Maribeth down with him. The masked riders fired back, providing cover. Hargreave! One shouted. Your mother said the ledger's hidden at your ranch. Riker's been after it for years. That's why he tried to kill you. That's why he wanted her. Maribeth's breath hitched. My father. He kept business accounts. He hid something before he died. Riker demanded I find it after the funeral. Nolan, your mother must have known. Everything snapped into place. Riker didn't want a bride. He wanted a document, one that might expose him. One he believed Maribeth and now Nolan possessed. Nolan pulled Maribeth and Eli toward the side door as Riker shouted for reinforcements. Gunshots cracked behind them, echoing across the chapel like thunder. Outside, the streets erupted with chaos as riders loyal to Riker stormed in, guns drawn. Nolan hoisted Eli onto his horse and pulled Maribeth up behind them. Hold on, he growled, spurring the horse into a dead sprint. Bullets ripped through the air. Dust exploded behind them. The chapel bell tolled as if warning the entire county that a war had begun. Eli clung to Nolan's chest. Papa, are they coming after us? They are, Nolan whispered. But I ain't losing either of you again. Maribeth's arms tightened around him. Nolan, I never stopped. Save it, he said softly. We get home alive first? Behind them, Riker mounted his horse, face twisted with rage. Hargreave! He bellowed. You can't hide. That ledger belongs to me. Nolan didn't look back. He kicked the horse harder. They tore across the plains as the sun dipped low. The shadows long and hungry. The truth finally clawing its way into the light. But nothing. Not the gunmen, not the lies, not the miles of open land terrified. Nolan more than the realization sinking into his bones. This wasn't just about the past. This was just the beginning.